In today's episode, we're going to talk about how to make group work actually work. Welcome back to the Teach for the Heart podcast, where we tackle teaching challenges from a biblical perspective. Why are we here? Because we don't believe that our spiritual walk and teaching profession should exist in two separate domains. Rather, the hope we have in Christ should change how we approach everything, not just at home, but at school as well. So join us as we explore both the spiritual and practical sides of key teaching challenges, integrating them together so we can succeed at teaching, glorify God, and make a lasting difference in our students' hearts and lives. This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. We also want to thank our sponsor, Teach Beyond. Have you ever thought about using your experience, education, or skills to serve as an international missionary? Teach Beyond is a global community of followers of Jesus, providing transformational education services as part of God's ongoing mission to transform individuals and communities into all He intends. There are countless opportunities to be a part of kingdom work around the world. Yes, serving full-time overseas, but also part-time from your home or short term on breaks. So visit teachbeyond.org/go to learn more. Today, we're really excited to talk about group work and ways to do collaborative working, some best practices to make it work, and why it's worth it. And joining me today is Carly Smith, our podcast manager. So Carly, thank you so much for being with us again today.
Always a delight. I'm excited to talk about this topic.
Yeah, and we're really excited about this. We're just going to talk about it. And we've also talked to some of you and asked your thoughts in our Facebook group. And we're going to share some of what you guys share with us as far as best practices, why it works, problems to avoid. So we're excited to dive into this today. So let's start out and talking, before we get into kind of some of the practical, let's take a moment and talk about the spiritual side of group work. Why would we do this? Does it have anything to do with our spiritual walk? Which, spoiler alert, we believe everything has something to do with our spiritual walk. So, Carly, what are some of the things our teachers shared about this?
And I wanted to thank the teachers who did share, and in the spirit of collaborating with you guys, there was some just amazing stuff, and I won't get to share everything, but one of our teachers in our Facebook group, Michelle, shared this. Students can learn as much from a textbook as they can from one another. Concepts like unity, not being prideful, learning to encourage one another, and compromise, which I think is just so insightful about how group work sort of expands students' horizons, right? And it actually leads me to think along the lines of an article that I had read from a Substack writer whose name is Josh Brake. He's called The Absent-Minded Professor. And he was talking about connections in the classroom that, when you have a classroom full of students, you don't just have one relationship with each student, right? There's interrelationships between all of the students, and it grows exponentially. And he's like an engineer, so he was like quadratic equations or something, but it was cool. But I can't explain it. But he was talking about how, like there's all of this relational opportunity that we can use for students to really connect with one another. And again, just that idea of you can't figure out unity by yourself. Like that's not a concept you can experience alone or just between two people to potentially. It's really a concept that requires a large group of people to connect with. And so even thinking along the lines, another teacher had shared that, collaborating means giving grace and practicing patience. And it got me thinking about those fruits of the spirit, right? That we can't really show or bear the fruits of the spirit outside of relationships. And so students in our classroom having the opportunity to bear those fruits is really important. Do they always do that? No. But it's such a great opportunity for learning and growing to happen and for us to experience growth in Christ, just right there in these relationships, trying to work towards something.
Yeah, I really like that. And I mean, obviously, as teachers, our primary goal is teaching the content, but anytime that we can also be teaching these other things in the way is so valuable. And we're not even talking right now about the values for group work for the content. There's many of those too. But yeah, when I think about the Christian life and just life the way God intended it, it was not meant to be lived alone. And I think in our society, with all our quote unquote connection with smart devices, we're more isolated than ever, and people, and so those helping kids develop those skills. Like you said, it can be hard to work with people. It's that, this is not easy. But developing those skills, learning what community life looks like, if they can even get a taste or a few steps, that's going to be invaluable for the rest of their lives. So that's great. Okay, let's delve a little bit into the practical realm now. What kind of tips did our teachers share about, helping students work well in groups?
Yeah, and we got tons of really great ideas. So a couple of them that stood out just in a big picture. Um, One teacher named Brooke, she said that she gives her students sentence starters so they have the words. My kids can look at the board and find phrases to help them agree or disagree, add to ideas, or ask questions. I love to watch them grow as the year goes on. And I started with this one because it just connects to me right back to what we were talking about, right? That we can learn to work together. We can learn the fruits of the spirit, and we can give students tools to embody those better, like a sentence starter. Even she, I think, was talking specifically about elementary school, but I could actually see this working really well with middle and high school students too. When, if you need to disagree with someone, you can, this is how you can start that sentence so you're not attacking people, or so that you're being kind and respectful and valuing other people's ideas. And I just think that's such an interesting way to help students in group work specifically. I just had never made that connection between giving them words, because really thinking about group work, it's a lot about talking, and there's communication there, and that's communication is hard. Like you said, we struggle with communication in our age, and so any opportunity to help them actually grow in that and give them like steps to move toward that and grow in that, I think is really, really beautiful.
I love that,
Another one,
Carly. Before we go to the next one, I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot. Can you try? But you're an English teacher. Can you maybe try to think of an example of what a sentence starter might look like for one of those situations, like to just help? Because I love this idea, but helping, I think that'd be
yeah,
helpful.
I think actually some of the work that I've done, we've done where people, you can say yes and
Mm.
go on and add an idea. If you want to add an idea to someone's, so you affirm their idea, you go on to add that. You could also do something, I'm thinking of even just discussing ideas, I guess is where my mind goes. I like that idea. What if we thought about it this way? And then you
Mm.
go into your idea. Um, or I think we need to pause on that for a moment. Let's go back to this part if someone's getting off topic. So even thinking about those different parts of where people are going off topic, how we're sharing different ideas, um, and how we can disagree without being mean or rude. So I think those are some of the things that come to mind, but I'm sure we'd love to hear from you guys any more ideas that you have for sentence starters.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that because that just helps make it a little more concrete. Yeah, basically, if you're thinking through what are some things they might run into? Can I give them some words to just kind of get them started and give them some language to use? I love that. Okay, great. What else was shared?
Yeah, so one person shared that you should just start small. If you don't do a lot of group work already, don't feel like you have to do these massive like group projects. When I was teaching, one of my co-teachers, she had these really intense groups with roles, and things were super organized, and it was like a machine. And I was just amazed, but that was just not what I could start with. So one easy way to really start thinking about building collaborative, capital and skills is doing think pair share, which I would assume most people know what that is, but just give the students something to think about, have them pair up and talk about it, and then one person shares, or each person shares the other person's thoughts. And then you can move then to timed discussion collaboration, which as an English teacher, I'm like, discussion is a great way to collaborate. It's hard, but it's such an interesting way to share ideas and grow in sharing opinions and talking, which is something most of our students are going to have to do in the real world. When you go to work, you sit in meetings and you talk and you share ideas and you have to discuss things. And then you can move on to larger group work. And this teacher said that really emphasized keeping things timed can be helpful, because if you just sort of let your groups go, we all know they can sometimes go off in different directions and lose focus, and as they're working, walking around and making sure that authentic work is being done, answering questions. And then the other tip that she shared was when you move on to projects, assign jobs at first and then move on to define jobs and let them pick their own. So, like, do a project where they have assigned roles, and then maybe do one where you define the roles and they get to pick which role they do. And then she said, if you are really brave, give them the end goal, divide them into groups, and watch the collaboration unfold that you've been teaching. So I even love the idea that we're that collaboration can almost be part of your curriculum, right? That you can treat it as something you're teaching. It's not just a tool for learning content, but the actual collaboration might be one of the things that you're teaching students, which, in our era, I think is really important because, again, there's a lot of kids who came out of COVID who it just changed the way people related to each other. And I think treating collaboration as almost a part of your curriculum is a helpful way to think about it and not get frustrated by collaboration not working.
Hmm. Yes, yeah, that's a really good point. Man, there was so much good stuff in there. I love that idea. If you don't do any collaboration, just start think, pair, share, or small group discussion. That's so accessible. You can set a timer for 2 minutes, 1 minute. Like, I mean, you could have that. That doesn't have to take a lot of class time, right? So that's a really easy way to incorporate it tomorrow. And then I love this advice on as you're building out, and I think this is really key because in order to do group work well, you really can't on day one just say, here's the project, go at it. I well, no, you can, but that's where you're going to give up. You're going to be like, that was a disaster. So that teacher that gave us this advice is saying that's after all the work of teaching how to collaborate. So I do think when you're first starting out, and maybe not even when you're first, for a while until they really develop the skills, defining the roles. So I'm excited. Let's dive into that a little bit about defining roles. And just to clarify, these aren't familiar, we're talking about when you give an assignment to a group, and we're talking about a bigger project here, you're not just going to say, here's the project, go, unless they have a ton of experience and skills already. Instead, you want to say, so and so, you're going to do this role. So and so, you're going to do this. So what advice did teachers share about that aspect?
Yeah, and I was really glad that people did share because I know as an English teacher and some of the projects, I was just like, I don't know what roles to assign, or I don't know how to
Mm.
build a project that has roles. And so I thought these were so helpful. So one of our teachers named Bev said, sit with each group at some point and ask them who is doing what. So maybe you have a project already that's happening with group work and you don't have roles, and sort of listen to how they are dividing up the work and how they're thinking about the different roles that and the different ways to contribute to that project. So I thought that was really insightful to even think about. Maybe you just already have something going and you can sort of glean information about what they're doing and how you can tweak it. Someone might be doing too much and maybe you take something off their plate and put it on someone else's the next time around. Um, Another student or another teacher, I'm sorry, named Patty said, have the kids divide up by what they're gifted in or want to do before assigning groups. So if you have ideas of what kind of roles you need in a group, have the kids figure out what are the ones that they would be best at and then assign groups pulling from each of those different pools. One, if they want to lead, if they want to be the recorder, whatever it is, have them do like first and second choices so that there is some choice for the students and they're playing to their strengths in that sense. Some of the ones that were listed on the site were so leader, which I think that role needs very, very clearly defined because we all know there's students who really want to be the leader, but they're not necessarily the best fit. Because even as a culture, we don't always have the best idea around what makes a good leader. So even defining what each role means was a lot of emphasis that we had talked about in the Facebook group, but especially that leader one, because there's so much baggage around that word and so many misnomers about what it means and what a leader should be like. So even for a different project, there's different kinds of leadership. So I think it's really helpful and it could be such a great conversation to have with students. And even if you have Christian students, to think about what kind of leader Christ was and what does leading look like in a way that honors God. Those can be some really cool conversations that come out of that role. Materials manager is another role, cleaner, timer, reporter, recorder, artist, question asker and answerer, which I thought was one I had never heard of before and I really liked because I love questions, and presenter. So even thinking about how do those different, obviously the presenter, that is going to be a specific type of kid is going to be very eager for that. And a specific type of kid is not going to be eager for that. And just, but I love those ideas for some different roles.
Yeah, that really is helpful, just thinking of some of those different things. And then of course you can let the content and the project define roles too. So, different projects are going to lend themselves. There might be a natural division of, step one, step two, step three, or there might be, so feel free to look at your project and think, how could you divvy this up? And then, Carly, it sounded like I think this would be a use your discretion thing. One way is for you to actually say, Mark is the leader, Elizabeth is the artist, but it also could give them and say, hey, here are the four roles. You guys decide who's doing what. That maybe that's like a next step.
Yeah.
And obviously this also very much depends on the age. If you have seniors that have some experience collaborating, that's going to look different than you're working with third graders who have never, and who, need more structure.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
actually, I was just thinking when I was teaching, the one teacher that did groups really well, they actually rotated roles so they,
Mm.
whatever their group thing was, they did it every week, and they rotated roles. So everyone got to learn each role, which is also an interesting way of thinking about that. And I think the other thing, just in general, a tip is find a teacher. If you don't know what roles to do, or if you're not sure about all this, find a teacher who does group work and loves group work, even because that was a chemistry teacher, but I got so many ideas from her, even though we had totally different subjects. Like English is nothing like chemistry. And so there's just a lot of ways that you can glean from other people. And even again, elementary school, I think sometimes high school teachers try to stay away from elementary type ideas, but there's some things that I've really learned from elementary school teachers that I totally went and ran with. And the high schoolers loved it, and it really helped them. So even those sentence starters, like that was an elementary idea, but totally, totally could work for high school. So I think the inspiration might be around the corner in the next room. Um, and you can kind of get good ideas from different kinds of people that you wouldn't expect.
I love that. And you're so right. With some stuff, it's like I need to talk to someone in my same grade level or same subject. But this is something where anybody that's doing this, you're going to be able to get ideas. I love that. I think some teachers also mentioned some online resources or books that they found helpful. What were some of those that were mentioned?
Yeah, and no one recommended this like with 100% thumbs up, but Building Thinking Classrooms and the videos by Peter, I don't know how to say his name, Liliadol, potentially. They said not all of his work is helpful, but some of it is really helpful. So he has videos on YouTube, and we'll link to those. And he has a book called Building Thinking Classrooms. And the
Okay.
other thing that was recommended was something called Kagan Cooperative Learning Structures. So
Kagan
those
structures.
were,
Yes.
yeah. Is it
Yeah,
Kagan?
though I think it is.
Oh,
Maybe I'm
okay.
wrong. We were just talking before this episode. How do you pronounce things?
Yes.
Regardless, those are great. Kagan or Kagan, or Kagan learning
Whichever.
structures. Yeah, I love those. We incorporate some of those in what we do too. Those are fantastic. I think Pearshare technically originated with them, or at least it's one that
Oh,
they
wow.
come up with. And Quiz Trade that we talk about is a Kagan learn. So yeah, with just I'll go off on that for just a second. What they have is they have these structures. We'll take think pair share as an example where that you think about it, you pair up, you talk, and you share. And that's something where you can like teach your students this structure, and then they can use that. You could do that every week or even even every day, and you don't have to reteach the structure because it can be reused in multiple different times without it getting old. So they have a whole lot of those structures, that you can just pick and choose the ones you like, teach one, teach another one next month, and kind of grow your repertoire of really easy. They're typically, some of them are longer or shorter, but they're, the kind of that very accessible, kind of all of the figuring out, the logistics are kind of all figured out for you. Yeah, so those are great. So we're going to link to all of this at teachfortheheart.com/323. If you want to check out those links, that'll make it easy. Just head over there and you can click right through and check those out. So Carly, do you have any kind of final advice or thoughts as we wrap up here?
I think there's something really magical in a sense. So, and maybe that's the Holy Spirit, however you want it, but there's something really delightful about students successfully working together. I think because it is so hard. So, like, I just want to acknowledge it is really hard to get students to work well together. Because if you think about it, it's hard to get adults to work well together. So, I think that I hope that people are encouraged to try, because I think it is a really worthwhile experience. And there's so much that can come out of that experience for students. And I just remember students who were able to do projects successfully with other students. It was such a different experience, and they learned so much. Like the learning that comes from engaging with people in a classroom, like one to one teaching. A lot of people are like one-to-one tutoring is what we should do, or this, there's some people who are on that train, and I just am not. There's something about the synergy of the classroom and kids engaging with one another and with you, and that is just something you can't do one-on-one. And there is learning that is supported and encouraged by being in a group together. So I think that even just that idea of valuing the fact that you do have a little community in your classroom every time there's a group of students in there. And if there's ways that you can, lean on those different connections that they make, that just there's so much opportunity for them to grow, for you to grow, and for you to even teach the fruits of the spirit without, you can have your expectations for group work be based on the fruits of the spirit, and they won't even know it's from the Bible. If you're in public school, like when I was teaching, you can share true things about how we should relate to one another without saying it's from the Bible, and encourage students in the good and the beautiful and the true in that way. So I think that's just like, go do more group work. It's really great.
I love that. And as you were saying that, it was reminding me of just, I'm sure a lot of you have had this experience where you're in a Bible study or a small group, and you're discussing a passage, and it's like, oh, I didn't think of that. I didn't think of that. And you're enriched by the discussion in a different way. Listening to a sermon is fantastic, but it's a different thing when you're in a discussion. And so I was reminding of that as you were talking. I think the students can experience, it's not quite the same as the Bible. It's the best when we're talking about the Bible, but can experience that communal aspect of different people hearing from their peers. It's a different learning experience, and it's valuable, not just for the social skills, but for the content too. So that's a great encouragement. So I echo, give it a try. Let us know how it goes. So. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. Once again, all the notes and links from this episode are at teachfortheheart.com/323. If you enjoyed this episode, we do hope you'll subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this right now. And you can share it with a friend as well. And that we would greatly appreciate that. One other resource I just want to mention to you real quick, in addition, is we do have a free training for those of you that are like, okay, my classroom's a little bit crazy, and I don't even know if I could handle this. So if you're having trouble with classroom management, we have a free training called How to Reduce Disruption so you can actually teach. You can get that at teachfortheheart.com/free. Well, this episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. All the views and opinions are our own and don't necessarily reflect those of the Herzog Foundation. Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to speaking with you again soon. In the meantime, teacher, remember, God is at work in you and through you, and he's using you to make a difference. Keep your eyes on him and teach for the heart.